because you're jumping back into the gap. Outlet to coach, it's either sideline, 2 on the side, 3 on the side. That's off the second cut. Lead the country in offensive rebounding.
Hey, Coach. Welcome to the Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Oliver. Let's share the game. Before we get started with this week's podcast, I wanted to let you know that access is now open to the Basketball Immersion Platinum Collective Mastermind. This is an exclusive, private, next-level coaching development program for a very specific coach. Go to basketballimmersion.com/platinum to learn more. Coaches, welcome to the Basketball Podcast with Duggar Baucom. Coach, welcome to the podcast. I am really excited for this one for a lot of reasons, but first, just welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Really honored and humbled to be on your show.
Well, thank you. And, I've known about you for a while. I've studied some of your stuff, and this is a compliment, and we'll get into a bunch of the stats and different things like this. But when I watch video of your team, I don't necessarily, and I know a bunch of people will study you after this, but I don't know if there's necessarily one thing I can say from watching your team that goes, hey, this is the reason they score so much. And I think that's a compliment because most of this comes back to philosophy, emphasis, and how you create freedom for your players. So I'm really excited to dive into that. But is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes they're scoring off for defense. Sometimes it's off offense. Sometimes it's, kids making plays. And so we just try to give the kids some freedom, try to teach them how to play, and then play the way we want to and play at the pace we want to. And it just kind of evolves from there.
For coaches that aren't aware, Coach is the head coach at the Citadel, and according to CoachStat.net, he has had and has the 2 most difficult jobs in Division I basketball. Previously, you're the head coach at VMI, and now you're at Citadel, and CoachStat.net ranks those as the 2 most challenging jobs is the way they phrase it, Coach. So obviously, you're a glutton for punishment.
I guess so. That's what my mother says. But no, I've just been very blessed to have one of the, I guess now 353 Division I teams. And even though they've been the 2 most difficult, they've been my 2 jobs and have been blessed to have them now starting my 15th year. So 10 at VMI and now starting our 5th at the Citadel.
And you're the only coach in the history of Division I military schools that has had double-digit wins for 13 consecutive years. And there was one other coach, and that was in the 40s and 50s at Navy, from what I understand. And just to give a quick rundown here, right, and the reason that I was very interested in talking to you is let's just talk about the 4 years at the Citadel. Most threes made in Division I in the last 4 years, and highest scoring team over the last 4 years. Coach, what are you doing to create such great offense?
Well, it's been a challenge here. We devised this system my second year at VMI. Out of necessity, actually, we had a couple kids voted out on an honor violation, my starting post guy and my starting point guard. And so I said, hey, if we're going to be different, let's be drastically different. So we developed the system there, brought it here. Certainly a challenge here. When I took over here, Citadel out of 351 teams was 341 in tempo. And here we are going to try to be, we had been number 1 at VMI for multiple years. So quite a challenge playing with those guys that I inherited who were coming off in a 11-win season, and I lost my top 4 players off that team due to graduation or transfer. So it's really been a challenge here trying to get guys, recruit guys to play this way, but also just the team we inherited. So we went the first year from 341 in tempo to number 1 in tempo and actually finished second in the country in scoring. So we won 10 games, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for what we were, the hand we were kind of dealt, we were pretty pleased with that.
Well, and again, your scoring ranking ranks ahead programs like North Carolina, Marshall, Gonzaga. This is no small feat, especially, again, given the circumstances. But let's go back to the origin, because I coached a bad team my first year in coaching. I'll say bad. Not as much talent is the polite way to say it. And at the beginning of the season, we ran very precise offense, and we lost a bunch of games. And then halfway through the season, I realized the error of my ways, and I said, just shoot the first available shot. And it created more possessions, which is counter to what a lot of people think, right? For a less talented team, you should hold the ball, you should be very precise. Talk to me about the origin of this for you and why you went to it.
Okay, so My first head coaching job was at a Division II school called Tusculum College, a D2 school in Greenville, Tennessee. And we played fast. I inherited a team that played Princeton. We played fast, but we played pack line defense. Because when I got there, they had played Princeton and pack. That kind of fit. And I got the job in late August. I thought it'd be crazy to go in there and change both. So my personality, my high school team, when I coached high school, we always played fast. We played fast offensively, slow defensively. So truly dual tempo. But we're successful. We won 2 championships in 2 years, went to the NCAA my second year. And VMI's AD was actually at the game. We lost to the number 1 team in the country, Bowie State, on a 3 at the buzzer in overtime, 91-88. And after my radio show, a gentleman came up to me and told me he was the AD at VMI and asked me if I've ever thought about coaching at a military school. And the answer was really no, but, it was a Division I opportunity. So I went up there. And Chris, I tried to play traditionally there, just like my Tusculum team had, dual tempo, pack line defense, play fast offensively. And my first game, we inherited a team that's not very good, as usually the case when you take over a program. But we scored 49 points in my first game. And we lost to Army 53-49. And that year we went 7-20. It was a nightmare. I missed the last 12 games due to a health issue. Just anything that could go wrong kind of did. So the next year, we start the season, start with our full roster, and I lose my starting post player, starting point guard. So I called my assistant that night who had been with me at Tusculum, and I said, hey, man, if we're going to be different, let's be way different. And I had studied Van Wahlberg, what he had done at Fresno City College, and even at his high school when he was a high school coach. I was always a big fan of Paul Westhead. I had studied some of Grinnell with Dave Arsenal, and so I just kind of put all that together and said, hey, this is the way we're going to play. And we sprung it on our team kind of uniquely. I actually had my assistant who was with me at Tusculum, was a Division II All-American, and I actually had him take one team, and we played that way with one team, not telling the other team. And yeah, great. I mean, the crazy thing, I couldn't get my gym for 2 days when all this came about. I sat down at the Outback Steakhouse with my assistants, put the salt shakers down as goals, and used sweet and low packs kind of to diagram the offense and defense. And one of my assistants asked me, he said, Coach, do you think this will work? And I said, David, I don't know, but I don't know that we have another choice. So the next day we had inter-squad scrimmage with officials coming. And so I put Coach Willis, Daniel Willis, who's now been with me 15 years, I put him on one team, told him how I was going to play. We brought them in about an hour early. And the other team had no clue. The officials had no clue. And I just kind of sat in the middle, let my other 2 assistants coach the 2 teams, and we played. And I think the final was like 129-111. And that was kind of how it was born. 2 weeks later, we play Ohio State at Ohio State. We lose that game, but that was kind of the infancy of it. It's just kind of grown from there. And we took that team from a 7-win team to a 14-win team and ended up playing in the Big South Conference Championship against Winthrop. So that was kind of the birth of it. We averaged 100.9 points a game. We made 442 threes, I think, that year. So we shot more threes than any team had ever attempted in Division I. And that was kind of our deal. We're going to press you, try to turn you over. I call it basketball inflation. Like you said before, the common thought would probably be, let's play slow. Play slow, play Princeton. I took it kind of a different way. Our football team here at the Citadel is very, very good. They run the triple option. They're able to run time off the clock with the triple option. It makes it difficult to prepare for. I wanted to be difficult to prepare for, but in basketball, you can't really utilize that much clock with the shot clock. So instead of every possession mattering so much, I went with the opposite philosophy. Let's make each possession matter less, because I'm playing normally, whatever way to say it, less talent. And so to make us competitive in that field with less talent, let's do something that the other team is not going to be prepared for. The other 28 games they play during the year, they're not going to face anything like we do. And so that was kind of how it was born, and that was kind of the thought process behind it.
Well, and that's the point. I mean, the key point for anyone thinking about this or already playing this way is that when you have more possessions, they aren't all as important. as when you have
Sure.
less possessions. And it's such a better way in a lot of ways to play as a player, I imagine. Certainly
Yes.
the players I've talked to, but it's also a little bit easier to coach in the sense that, again, you're not living and dying on each possession, and it's not this, always grinded out affair. Now, it may come down to close possessions at the end of the game, but overall, again, it's fast, it's free, and it's wonderful. So, Coach, the main part of this for me is coming back to not the what, but the how. The how did you come to sell your players on this, and how do you continue to sell your players on the fact that they have freedom? Because so many of these players came up in systems where they didn't have freedom. How do you get them to buy in?
Well, going back to the original scrimmage that we had, when we were finished the scrimmage, the referees left. I set the guys right in the middle of the floor, on the logo in the middle of the floor. And I said, guys, in 2 weeks, when we play Ohio State, this is how we're going to play. And they looked at me kind of like I had four heads. And I said, this is the way we're going to play. And if you guys will buy in, we'll lead the country in scoring. We'll lead the country in assists. We'll lead the country in steals. We'll lead the country in three-pointers made. And Reggie, you have a chance. We had a kid named Reggie Williams. I said, Reggie, you have a chance to lead the country in scoring. And they looked at me like I was crazy. And I walked back to my office, and Reggie came in my office, and he said, Coach, do you really believe all that? I said, yes, I do. And he said, you really think I can lead the country in scoring? I said, yeah, if you'll be my biggest cheerleader. And I said, Reggie, more importantly, I think we can win more games playing this way. And so he bought in. He was my best player. He was my kind of team leader. And so sure enough, Chris, at the end of the year, we had doubled our win total, made it to the Big South Championship game. We led the country in scoring. We led the country in three-pointers made. We led the country in steals. We led the country in assists. Reggie had led the country in scoring at 28 points a game. And one of my other kids had led the country in steals. So they made me a profit, but I had no idea that it would turn out quite like that. But I just had great kids that kind of bought in, and they were the start of all this. And for all the kids that have played for me since, they started it. And I had to convince them that they were good three-point shooters, whether we were or not. And we were going to shoot so many of them that, our goal going into a game, I had set some goals. We're going to try to have 90 shots a game. We're going to try to make 50 of those three-pointers. We're going to try to have crashed offensive boards. We're going to try to force 25 turnovers a game. Those were goals that we had. And at the end of the year, we had reached a lot of those. I mean, we shot 42 threes a game and ended up making 13.4. Now, that's not a great percentage, but when you make 13 threes a game and average that, it'll keep you in a lot of games.
It's great stuff. And we're going to talk about the defensive side and the offensive side, but let's focus on the offense first. So what are you emphasizing? What are you actually doing technically and tactically? You're shooting threes, no mid-range, scoring at the rim, but how are you accomplishing that?
Yeah, so my first year that we did it, we actually used a little bit of what Grinnell does. Our spacing was exactly like Van Wahlberg used, with the dribble drive concepts. That was our spacing. We were running on makes and misses, not to get into defense, but we pressed all over the place. So our defense kind of fed our offense. That was a lot of our fuel for it, but we would sprint on makes or misses. We used actually Grinnell's logic in the platoon system our first year, where we had 3 sets of guys that would play 2 minutes, and then we'd put in another set. And because as hard as we wanted them to play and trapping all over the floor, they needed to be fresh. Now, Reggie was my best player and also my best in-shape player, so he was able to double shift some. But he ended up averaging 28 points for us, and the scoring is kind of spread out when you do that. Reggie was the highest scorer, and then we had a bunch of other guys in double figures, and it was pretty consistent throughout. But three-pointers a weapon. We tried to get to the free throw line by driving the ball to the rim. So we'd shoot threes, layups, or free throws. And if they shot a mid-range shot, that was the only reason they really came out of the game. Or if they didn't shoot the ball when they were open, that was another reason to come out of the game. Because if they shot it, the other 4 guys knew what to do. 3 of them were going to the glass along with the shooter. And, we got 1 guy back in transition, and that's just the way we were going to play. And basically create havoc defensively to kind of fuel that.
Well, and we'll talk about the defense, but also you're a little more structured than people might think on offense. That's fair to say, right? I mean, this isn't complete open chaos. I mean, you're actually quite structured. And from what I watched of your clips from last year, the spacing is really good. I mean, there's a lot of situations where players are occupied by movements off the ball so someone can drive a gap. And just, again, really common sense stuff to play this way, but this isn't open chaos. This is structured offense.
Yeah, I mean, we run to spots, and we play from those spots. So we play different actions off those spots. But Total Reporter one time, we were averaging like 103 that year. And I said, there's truly a method to our madness. Now, if we're not making shots, it just looks like madness. But there truly was and is a method to what we're doing. And we try to, like you said, we try to space. We try to create gaps by cutting and then drive off those cuts. We also do some isolations. We try to put our players in the best position where their unique skills. We don't ever want anybody on the floor that can't shoot it, even out to 3-point range. So even our 5-man can step out and shoot it. So we try to exploit mismatches. And a lot of guys that would be tweeners in a lot of programs, the 6'5" guy that's not really a 3, not really a 4, you just don't know what he is. Those are what we've kind of made our living at, having players like that are just mismatched nightmares, and space and play and teach the guys our actions. We still run some sets, but most of ours are actions, dribble, handoff, ball screen, dribble, handoff, reverse pivot, back cut, dribble at somebody, handoff. We shoot off the hand a lot. So concepts that just happen in the flow of the game.
Now, are those automatics based on if this situation's happening, the players flow automatically into it? They're not calls, I guess, based on what you're saying?
We actually have calls, but certain situations dictate it. So if we have 3 guys on the side of the floor, then we're probably going to run Dallas, which we're going to run dribble, handoff, ball screen. And we'll run every time we're on the free throw, we're going to run some type of set back at you where we're trying to create a shot for somebody in particular on those free throw situations. That's the one time that we're all on the same page and we know exactly what we're going to do. We probably have 8 sets that we run off the free throw line back at people. But because we feel like that's a good time, that's almost like a transition type situation because you have your free throw shooter and, 2 guys on the block, and make or miss, you're going to be able to push it back at them. But a lot of things happen basically organically. That's what we want to happen. And if this happens, then we do this, So if we drive it from the wing, we're always going to have somebody come in from behind. We're always going to have somebody for the hammer pass. Post player will be eye cutting. Once the movement starts, then everybody kind of does what they're supposed to do based on that movement.
And one thing that you said there that I think is really important for coaches is plays on free throws. Again, such an easy time to organize something that you want to match up. And in the best teams that I've always been around, have always had great actions after free throws that you're flowing into to attack a specific matchup. And that's great. In those examples, are you looking for something special within each game, or do you have particular go-tos for all free throws?
Yeah, we probably have 8 sets. Now, we may put in something special for a certain team, but we have basically 8 sets that we'll run against anybody. And then if we see something in a scouting report we think we can exploit, we'll put that in. And that'll just be part of our norm after that. But every time we're big on huddles, big on teams, unity in the team. So every free throw situation we huddle, and we're going to call something that we're going to run back at you. Same thing defensively. If we're shooting a free throw, at that point in time when we huddle, we want a tight huddle. And at that point, we call our defense, what press ran. I tell them you can't muddle, it needs to be a huddle. So, really get in there together and call the action. It's almost like a huddle in football, call the action and break from it and know where you're supposed to be.
So you also mentioned offensive rebounding, and you are very aggressive going to the offensive boards as a team. And again, that's somewhat unique. I think it's going to become less unique as the analytics prove it out. But that's something that philosophically you've done going back to VMI?
Yeah, something that we did back at VMI. And you're exactly right on the analytics standpoint. We did figure out last year we were one of the worst teams in transition defense. And part of it was because of our board coverage. But so we're going to make some adjustments in. We were trying to go for offensive rebounds. We had some guys trying to go, not go, get caught in what we call no man's land. I didn't have one of my more athletic teams last year. So we're kind of changing up a little bit of that. But at VMI, we would always send 3 guys in the shooter. So basically 4 guys to the boards. Because my whole philosophy there was a mindset going into the game was you don't want to get into a running game with VMI. So even when they could get the rebound, a lot of times they didn't push it back at you. And if they did, and there was 1 or 2, you gave up 1 or 2 layups because of poor transition defense. I call that the cost of doing business. All that did was get the game flowing at the pace I wanted it to be. And that sounds crazy, but if you watched us play enough, it kind of fueled our fire. And, you make a 2 on one end, we're going to come down and try to shoot a 3 on the other. And if you make enough of those, it kind of balances out. But it was a mindset, at least originally, if we shoot it, go get it. And that's why we couldn't pass up an open shot, because our guys were trained in practice. If so-and-so's open, he's in rhythm and range, he's going to shoot it. So it's time to go to glass. And we talked about angles, the ball comes off opposite and discussed all that. And then once we started playing, it was just kind of what we did.
It's great stuff. It just presents a whole image that we're going to be aggressive. And if we're going to get beat, we're going to get beat. We're still going to be proud of ourselves, because at the end of the day, we're going to be aggressive and give it our best effort. Is that a mentality that'll work anywhere, or is this particular to military academies that you find that type of person is attracted to that type of aggression?
Well, I think it'll work anywhere. People have always asked me, what if you were at a normal school, would you do this? And we had a team at VMI win 24 games. We had one win 22 games and playing this exact way. And I said, yeah, I would just do it with better players, and get them to buy in, Yeah. But in my situation, being at a military school, we have unbelievable challenges recruiting. And I was at VMI for 10 years. I had 10 classes that I recruited at VMI. Chris, we beat 2 a school on 1 kid each. So of all the kids that we brought in 10 classes, over 40 kids over those 10 years, only 2 kids had one other Division I offer. So basically we're playing with Division II kids that want a shot at to play in Division I. And so our talent was a little bit different than other people in our league. So the style became attractive because we say, hey, you're going to play fast, you're going to shoot 3s. So it was able to help us get in some doors with some kids that normally we probably couldn't have if we played traditional, walk it up, going to run a set every time. So it was intriguing to some kids. And once we could get them on campus, show them film, but it was basically kids that nobody else wanted, nobody else thought was good enough. We had a kid one year, Stan Okoye, who now plays on the Nigerian Olympic team and makes 6 figures in Spain. He was on Boston's Summer League team this year, Denver's Summer League team last year. Stan was going to go to NC State and just be a student. And he was 6 feet, but literally was 7 feet arms. And he was perfect for our press. He had never shot a 3 in high school. So we brought Stan in. We brought him in April. And he was just going to go to NC State, get his degree, and play intramurals. And he came to VMI, ended up wearing gold stars, which is the highest thing you can do academically. He was vice president of the honor court. He was Big South Player of the Year. Only player in Big South history to score over 2,000 points, 900 rebounds, and 100 blocks. So it kind of changed the kid's life, and now he's playing for 6 figures. So, but people would always ask, how did you get Stan at a military school? And I think because nobody else wanted him. Literally, guys in my league said, how did y'all get Stan? And it was specific to them. Yeah, y'all didn't want him. So, and he ended up being player of the year.
Well, and because Stan wasn't Stan at the time. Right? That's the whole thing that people don't understand is the development that goes into that. So let's talk about that. How do you guys practice? What's the methodology and practice that leads to this freedom, this comfort with playing fast, and obviously doing the things that you want them to do?
Yeah, so I think it starts actually prior to practice. We have pretty stringent conditioning program, and our guys have to be in shape. And that's gone anywhere when I was at VMI, from being on the track, running 400s on the track, and everything's timed and everything we do, and a lot of sprints on the court, a lot of agilities, cone drills, stuff like that. Now, since we've been at the Citadel, we were in Charleston, South Carolina, so one of the most beautiful places in the world. So, and I'm a beach guy, so a lot of our training we've actually done on the beach. We've ran in the sand and run across the Ravenel Bridge, which is a 3-mile bridge that spans across Charleston, and we've done some kind of outside the box things to get in shape here. But the kids do not like preseason conditioning. They do not like that. But I tell them that's just part of it. And then once we start practice, we shoot probably more than a lot of teams do in practice, because that's in essence what we're trying. The biggest factor of our offense is being able to make 3-point shots. Everything we do, we call it dynamic. So very seldom are we in the half court, because the way we play on both ends. So a lot of it's up and down. We don't practice long. Usually once we start, now the first 4 or 5 practices, we might go 2 hours. But other than that, we'll go about 90 minutes max, because it is so, up and down. And at a military school also that nobody ever knows or thinks about is we just don't have access to our kids. We do not get anywhere close to our 20 hours a week that every Division I program has. I have access to my kids literally from 3 in the afternoon till 6 at night. And so I have to get all my work done in that window because of either class assignments or military obligations or things like that. So we kind of work it into a tight time frame. But our whole thing is, once we get a kid, is developing to how we want him to play and kind of go from there.
And I read that you chart everything shooting-wise in practice, or is that just in workouts, or is that in practice? And then if so, how are you charting it? And is that competitive? How are we developing this mentality to shoot?
Yeah, so we have a big board outside our locker room, between our locker room and our team room, and big, huge grease board, and it has every kid's name on it. It has it broken down into weeks. And we always tell kids, and I think this is true for any program that you're in, we can try to make you the best player possible from 3 to 6, but what you do from 6 to 3 is even more important. So when the kids have a free class period, or when they do have a little downtime, we want them in the gym getting up shots. So we have a graduate manager that works them out, but we expect them to get a certain number of makes per week, and we keep that up, and it's kind of peer pressure, and they see the percentage that they shoot, and it's charted weekly. Now the same thing is charted after every practice. We chart every live, anything we do live is charted. So we want to see if there's a carryover from shooting on the gun or shooting, with your partner, to actually live shooting once we start practice and going up and down. So we chart that also, and that's also put on the board. So it's right there in front of them. So I have no problem telling a kid, good shot, bad shot. That was a bad shot. You haven't been in the gym getting up your shots, and you're not going to shoot that shot until you do, or until you prove to me and the other coaches that you can make that. So we kind of use it that way, and we don't recruit anybody really that can't shoot, but we just want to become better shooters, and we want to expand their range. And this year the 3-point lines moved back, which will be an interesting deal. We've experienced that before. When it moved back the last time, it actually helped us. So we're at least brainwashing our kids right now that moving that line back is going to help us also.
Hey, Coach, a brief interruption from the podcast. Have you ever wanted to visit collegiate practices? Have you ever wanted to spend a weekend immersed in basketball development? Stimulate your coaching and spend a weekend with Basketball Immersion as we tour a number of collegiate practices. October 18th to 20th. Go to basketballimmersion.com/practice tour to learn more. All practice visits will be followed by debrief sessions and discussions designed to augment learning. Go to basketballimmersion.com/practice tour to learn more. Now back to our podcast. I firmly believe it's going to help you, because your players aren't scared of the 3-point line in any way. So that's not going to even influence them. And more so, it's going to create more space for you guys, which is something I saw. And again, I don't know if this is conscious or not, or these are just independent decisions, because when you watch film, sometimes it's hard to tell. But your players were doing a really good job at driving gaps when off-the-ball defenders were occupied with other actions. Let's say a stagger was happening and the defense wasn't focused on the player with the ball, and that was the time the player with the ball would drive it. Is that a conscious process? That's something that you emphasize within your actions?
Yes, it is. We think there's a lot of, on defense, we're always talking to our players about don't ball watch. And we try to keep other people occupied, like we said before, to take advantage of mismatches. We try to isolate a lot of time, 2-man game on one side. I think, Chris, you've been doing this a long time, but back when we first started it, I do a lot of watching. I watch a lot of FIBA basketball, and I think the Europeans and The international teams have caught up and passed us in a lot of areas. So we do a lot of actions that they run. Like I always tell kids when I recruit them, I'm going to have to break you of some of your solid habits that you had in high school because we're going to do some things differently here. I was always taught when I played way long time ago, never leave your feet to pass. Well, we leave our feet to pass all the time, with the hook passes, with the hammer passes, with the just different kind of passes to hit the open man. And back when I was playing, I got pulled out of the game for that. But yeah, so it is a process. I mean, everything, once a movement starts, then everything kind of flows with it. Now, if you're making shots, it looks really pretty. The nights that you're not making shots is pretty difficult. And those nights, you hope you can get to the free throw line and hope you can get to the rim a little bit more.
I love that, just that acknowledgement of how the game's changed. And again, I mean, this is all positive and these are all realities, is that players are just more skilled nowadays. So they can do more things. And that's a product of, again, it's better coaching, it's better exposure to the game, all these different things. And then really, I mean, the question for me comes back to how much time do you spend coaching decision-making within this system? You talked about shot selection already. So can you talk a little bit beyond that about decision-making?
Yeah, we chart one thing. We use the terminology, the dome. So where a lot of guys use paint touches, we use the dome. So if you can imagine basically what would be the pack line. So, inside the arc, probably out to 16, 17 feet, just above the free throw line. And if you do a semicircle from the baseline, we call that the dome. And we try to pierce the dome. So once you pierce the dome, you can break down defenses and then the ball starts moving. You can get teams in rotation. And that's what we're always trying to do is get teams in rotation. So we charted just this past 2 weeks in workouts. We were shooting 52% on dome touch shots overall and 43% from three. On non-dome touch shots, piercing the dome, we call them PTDs. On non-PTDs, we were shooting 19%. So that's pretty drastic. So we tell guys, you got to pierce the dome. We don't want shots that occur before piercing the dome. We got to get the ball moving from side to side. We got to get the defense broke down. We call it get them on the run, keep them on the run. That's what we try to get our offense to do to the defense. So that's a thought process. It's something we talk about. It's something we drill. We drill throwing, we call them over the top passes, driving the lane and go over the top, throw it to the guy in the corner. We talk about next one's turning a good shot into a great shot. All these are things we work on in our breakdown with our perimeter players and our post players. I mean, we do ball handling with post players. We do dribble drive with post players. We do draw and pitch shooting with post players, of course, and our guards. So, I mean, it's something we work on every day. And then hopefully by the time you're ready to play, starting in November, the guys have it pretty well, have a pretty good grip on it. And guys that have been in the program help guys bring them along. But our freshmen, we brought in 6 freshmen this year, which is anytime that's a challenge. But with the 3-point line moving back, for a high school player now, it has moved back over 2 feet. So that's a very interesting thing that we're dealing with now because that's a pretty drastic difference for a high school player. So our guys, our perimeter players are certainly getting in there, getting up more shots from 3 because it's an adjustment for them.
And Coach, I've talked to some people that played against you and know you a little bit, but one thing that came through, even in some of the articles that I read, is that like everyone talks about the offense, but when you talk to coaches that coach against you, they talk about one of the most frustrating things playing against your teams is the defense, is the things that you're doing on defense. So let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about full court pressure. Is that on every possession? And then what's the goal with the full court pressure?
Yeah, it started when we first started, it was frenetic. I mean, we would trap on even misses. And, we pressure on misses. Then we've evolved, we changed up, but we're always in some type of pressure, whether it be man pressure, zone pressure. Sometimes we'll trap, sometimes we won't trap. We'll traps in different areas of the court. That kind of comes back where the huddle's so important on the free throw. We'll call different presses. We might be in one press on a 3, maybe another press if the team makes a 2. It's just, and a lot of them look the exact same, but we're trapping at different places. And my goal, the whole point of everything is to whatever guys start working on this week for the season. So we have 42 days get 30 practice days within 42 days before our first game. So whatever teams are working on for these 30 days, the one time you play us, or if you're in conference, the 2 times you play us, we're not going to allow you to do the things you're practicing for those 30 days. We're going to try to take you out of that. Now, if you have better players than us, you might can make enough plays to beat us, which oftentimes happens, but we're not going to just let you sit there and run sets that you've worked on and worked on and worked on. We're going to put pressure on you to make your players make plays. And we're not scared to do gimmick stuff also. Like we'll press back into triangling too, and we'll change defense within a possession. We'll do that. We've done everything from playing a 2-man zone and match up 3 guys man-to-man. Our whole goal is not to let your best player beat us, make other guys beat us. And so there's a lot of thought that goes into our defense, even though we give up a lot of points, but that's because there's so many more possessions in a game.
And the thing that I think, again, is we need to acknowledge is that you're not trying to give up baskets. You're not trading 3s or 2s for 3s. You're not doing that at all. I mean, you're playing defense and you're trying to get high percentage shots on offense. So this all goes together. But the part I read is that you will change defensive possessions within possessions, which I love that concept. Are you still using that concept, Coach?
Yes, we do that pretty often. It depends on who we're playing. We do it a lot more in conference probably. But it's allowed us to play with some teams that are much more talented than us in our league. And, you know, we played a team that was leading our league 2 years ago. And, you know, they shot 3 of, I think, 21 from 3. And they, you know, after the game, they said, well, they only made 3 threes in the game. I said, yeah, because the 21 shots they had were not by their best players because we're running them off the 3-point line. We'll let some other guys that percentage-wise aren't great 3-point shooters. We'll let them shoot those, but we're not going to let your best guys shoot them. And we ended up, you know, winning that game. But it's a little avant-garde what we do defensively. Like, I'm not scared to try stuff. I got into this business late. I have a kind of a different philosophy. I've had some life challenges. Like, I'm not scared to do really anything.
Can you give us an example, Coach?
What we do defensively?
Like are we switching from zone to man? Are we switching from a certain zone to another zone? Are we switching to a box and one? What are we doing in terms of some of these examples of switching within the possession?
Okay, so before we've been man, some of the Van Wahlberg pressure that he used to run, get it up one side, trap from behind, get that one trap, have 2 trappers, 2 thieves, and a goaltender, and then we'll come back and be in a 2-3 zone. Or we'll be in a possession, we'll be in a 1-3-1, kind of big 1-3-1, and go to 2-3 once the ball hits a certain part of the floor. We'll be in man pressure, come back and be in triangling 2, or a defense we call 3-eye, where we'll guard you 3 guys man-to-man and 2 in a zone. So we're not, you know, we play box and ones, we'll come out of timeouts and be in a box and one. We're usually going to change up something in a timeout. So hopefully whatever you're drawing up in the huddle when you come out, we're going to be in something different, even though it might be something, you know, pretty unique to us. But our guys believe in it. Our guys understand that this is going to give us our best chance to win.
It's great. It's a fun concept. So, Coach, you are the only Division I head coach now who used to be a police officer. Is that true? Do we know that? Is that a fact?
You know what? That's an interesting question. This is crazy, but I actually heard I used to be a city policeman, and I also was a state trooper. I think I am the only one that's ever been a state trooper that's a college basketball coach, Division I coach. But I think actually Tim Clueless at Iona, who ironically plays a lot like we do, I think he has a law enforcement background from way back when. I read that one time. But
that's pretty cool, though.
Yeah. So I've had like multiple lives. I've had my law enforcement life uniquely from the day I started college till the day I graduated college was 6,122 days. So if you do the math on that, that's 17 years. So I was a traditional college student, not a basketball player, played baseball, and actually quit college. My dad died at a very young age, and I came back to work in his business and was out of college and went into quit college, went into law enforcement after my dad died. and was in that for 9 years, and basically had a heart attack at 30 and had to go back to school. I was here. I didn't have my education. So I went back to school, started working basketball camps. And at 35 years old, I graduated college, and Coach McKillop at Davidson, who's probably the most underrated coach in the country, does more with less. Now, I did have Steph Curry, but this was all pre-Steph Curry days when I worked for Coach, and he gave me an opportunity. I always joke I was the fourth man on a 3-man staff. I was the administrative assistant. They didn't even use the term Dobo back then. But I broke into coaching at 35 years old, and all thanks to Coach McKillop from working his camp. And 8 years later, I was a head coach. So I've been very blessed.
It's a great story, and all the different things that have led to your success, and it's been tremendous. And I want to throw out a few things that I've heard you say, because I think they're really cool, and I would love for you to define them a little bit more in this example. Like, you talked about shot inflation. Great terminology, great phrasing. What exactly is shot inflation, and how do you explain it to your team?
We use a term, this is kind of crazy, but we use a term, we want to shoot it before we turn it over. So we'll shoot the first available shot, where a lot of teams will run some false motion and then get the shot, hopefully the shot they want. Now with the 30-second clock, I guess with you play with a 24-second clock. I'd give anything if we were playing for 24-second clock, but we'll shoot the first shot that's available and then try to go get it. My whole philosophy there is shoot it before you turn it over, because almost always a turnover is going to be run back at you. And usually with great success, the other team's going to turn that transition into points. Whereas if we shoot the shot, the first good available shot we get, rhythm and range, we know we're going to go try to make an effort to go get it on the glass. That gives us another opportunity to score, which creates another shot. That's just kind of our philosophy. I'd rather shoot it than pass around, turn it over, and be chasing it back the other way. So our whole goal to get more shots is to turn you over, and to also offensive rebound, and play at a pace that allows more shots. So that's kind of where shot inflation comes in. One of my best teams, my best team I've ever coached, we were 24-8 at VMI my 4th year. Beat Kentucky in Rupp Arena opening night, and beat them 111-103. But our whole point with that team was we got out rebounded 12 rebounds a game for the year. I mean, that was the difference in rebounding margin. But we forced enough turnovers, shot enough threes to counterbalance that, and we went 24-8, played in the Big South Championship game. So.
No, that's awesome. It's such a great story, and it just, again, a lot of proof behind the system. And the other term that I love phrasing of this is that your shot chart looks like a donut. Can you explain that one?
Yeah, we're going to shoot it from the 3, so there's going to be a lot of shots from there. We'll shoot it, corners, slots, top, wings. 3-point shots can really come from anywhere, but we hope they come off dribble penetration and kickouts. I got a buddy that's in coaching, just met with him a couple of weeks ago, and he calls them 10-toed shots. So he wants all 10 toes facing at the basket, as opposed to coming in off a screen with your inside foot. He believes that's a way better shot, as I do. I think percentages will tell you that. But also layups. We want layups. We want shots at the rim based on layups, driving it to the hole. And then, of course, if we do that like we're supposed to, then we'll get to the free throw line. And if you get to the free throw line, there's no higher analytical shot than the free throw, especially if you shoot 75% or more. So we try to get to the the free throw line as much as possible, but we don't do it traditionally like throwing it into a big post player who's going to back you down and, get fouled at the basket. Most of ours is going to come from dribble penetration.
And the shooting threes square to the basket. I mean, that's, again, you remember working camps when you were young or when you were first learning coaching, and the debate that kept people up for hours was, are you inside foot? Are you dominant foot? Are you this foot? And we've kind of made that debate obsolete in a lot of ways because of the emphasis on shooting threes with 10 toes facing the rim. And I love that part of it. And I look for that constantly within our film too. It's like you can show a player immediately that they weren't prepared to shoot, because every three basically within our offense, with, say, an exception of having a Steph Curry where he can shoot from any direction, would be facing the rim. Is that how do you develop that emphasis and understanding? Is there certain things that you do off penetration reaction or different things that you're coaching within that to get them to be able to focus on that?
Yeah, every day at practice, we do a post and perimeter breakdown. And with our guards, we work on draw and pitch shooting. And we want and part of that's the passing also. We want the pass on target and on time. But for the shooter, it's a lot of shot preparation. So we want them down low. We say go from a low to a high. We want them asking with 10. That means 10 fingers, have your hands up ready to shoot it, knees bent. And the way we shoot step-in shots is what we call them. So if you're a right-handed shooter, we want your left foot in the ground and you're going to step into your shot 10 toes facing the rim. That's the way we teach it. Some guys teach hopping to your shot. That can be debated either way. But both of those methods 10 toes towards the rim. But we want our guys down and ready. Shot preparation's key. Good pass leads to a good shot. We say that all the time. Shot preparation, get down, go low to high. Those kids hear that 100 times every practice. So hopefully that, when they go to sleep at night, they're thinking about shot preparation. And it's something that we drill every day. And that's why it gives me confidence when they're out there to shoot those shots because, we've worked on it the day before. We worked on it the week before. We've worked on it since we started summer workouts. So once you get in our program, that's just going to be part of it. And we're going to use our terminology to teach you that. And you're going to obviously learn it.
You talked about conditioning a little bit, and obviously some of that taken care of by them just being within a military academy, but also the way you practice and the way you play, you're conditioning every day. And you already alluded to that you feel that you practice for less time. That's time constraints of the student athlete, but that's also because you're getting right to the point and you're conditioning throughout practice because that's how you play. Is that another factor in kind of the duration of your practice?
True, it is. We'll go for 90 minutes and they'll get maybe 2 or 3 1-minute water breaks during that time, but everything, there is no standing. We transition. I got this from Shock and Smart a long time ago, transition in everything you do. So like in the weight room, we transition from squats to bench or squats to lunges or whatever it is. Our strength coach knows transition is key. Move from one thing to another. We do the same thing with our drills. We do, like I said before, everything's pretty much dynamic up and down the floor. Like there's never a point we condition after practice. Our conditioning takes place within that 90 minutes. And our shooting drills, everything's game speed. We never shoot a shot in practice that we don't shoot in a game. Or we'll, never shoot a shot. We'll never shoot a mid-range jumper in practice. If I walk out in the gym and a kid's shooting from the elbow, I'll jump him. What are you doing? Get back or get up, one or the other. So that's something that we just talk about in our program. And guys know when they go to practice, it's going to be a 90-minute battle. And everything we do, whether it's shooting competition, whether it's live 5-on-5, whether it's 3-on-3, one side of the court, whatever it is, there's always a winner and a loser in everything we do. So after that, there is some sprints involved, for the loser. The old SEAL terminology, it pays to be a winner. We say that often. And so our conditioning kind of takes care of itself within the practice. Now that we're in season, basically, there'll be no more conditioning other than our practices. And now we also look at load management. We'll back off once we start getting closer to games, and we might only go an hour and 15 minutes. In season, when we're in the middle of conference play, we might go an hour. So all that's based on where we are in the season and kind of load management for our guys.
Well, that was one of my questions, and I'm glad you answered that because that's the other part of it is day before a game or whatever it may be, that you can back off on duration and still keep intensity high because, again, they're purposeful. They're doing exactly the way they're going to play within practice as well. But, Coach, shifting gears just a little bit, the mentality for you as a head coach to play this way. What are the challenges for coaches that play this way or considering this way? What is the biggest challenge for your mentality as a head coach?
I think the biggest thing, people ask me, I'll have high school coaches a lot of times come in. We'll have other college coaches come to practice. And I'll just tell them, you kind of got to be probably a little half crazy to play this way. But more importantly, you have to be committed. And I've been 100% committed into this ever since we doubled our win total the first year. My coaches, like I said, one coach has been with me starting, I guess, his 16th year with me. So he's been with me through the whole process. crazily, my other two assistants have played for me. So they played for me. My recruiting coordinator played on my first team that played fast. He was a senior that year, my captain. And my other assistant played on the team at 124 games. He was the captain of that team. So they actually played within the system. So to ask if we're bought in would be, 100% everybody on my staff. And we recruit to this system. And my kids are bought into it. But for anybody that's attempting to try it and wanting to try it, it's a fun way to coach. It's a fun way to give kids freedom. I think this day and time, there's too many coaches that actually, I call it joystick coaching, like try to control every movement like you would a PlayStation game. We're going to put you in spots and let you make plays. And we sell our kids on that in recruiting, but then we live by it. In recruiting, it's funny, no coach ever will walk into a kid's home and say, hey, we're going to play slow. We're going to play one of the lower tempos in the country. Everybody goes in every kid's home and says, hey, we're going to play fast. And we tell kids, hey, just look at the numbers. See what the numbers are. To us, fast is not 71 points a game. That's not a fast team. And we'll say, look at what we've done in the last 15 years. 14 years of playing fast, starting our 14th year of playing fast, we've led the country in scoring 7 times. So we, tell kids, look at that, because that is an allure to go into a military school if you can play in this style. So we think that helps us recruiting.
Well, you're definitely not lying to them. That's the beautiful thing. So, Coach, you mentioned to me just quickly prior to this talk that you had someone explain your philosophy to you better than you explain it. What a great compliment in a way. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I love to read, so I'll read anything. Not all basketball, a lot of other things. But I was reading about a guy named John Boyd, who was actually an Air Force fighter pilot back in the 50s. In reading him, every Air Force in the world uses a lot of his philosophies. And a lot of his philosophy was written. He wrote an essay, a discourse of winning and losing. And in that, he has a theory of fast transients. But basically, the whole thing that we try to accomplish, which he explained way better than me, is trying to get inside the opponent's decision cycle. So every day we play fast. We probably play more in our practices than most teams do, because it's decision-making kind of on the fly with what we do. And he had this concept or this theory that's now used in all of aviation, especially in aviation warfare, and it's called OODA, and it means basically observation, orientation, decision, and action. And he calls it the OODA loop. And businesses use this now and everything. I was unaware of it, but I've always wondered why exactly we do what we do, and how I could articulate it. But he basically articulated it better than anybody. You have to quickly outthink or outmaneuver your opponent. And he was always known as a guy, he would always bet his other pilots $40 that he could get onto their tail from any position. Like his jet could get on your tail in less than 40 seconds in a dogfight situation. And that's kind of, what we want to do on the basketball court, where our whole point of what we're doing is trying to get in our opponent's decision cycle and make them make decisions that they normally don't have to make. So just kind of found that pretty interesting that the guy in the 50s kind of could explain what we try to do, which I've known what it was, but I wasn't smart enough to figure it out.
Well, now you're even smarter, Coach. That's great stuff. That's wonderful. It's good to hear. And Coach, you've been a member of Basketball Immersion for a while. Can you give me some of the takeaways you've got from being in that community?
Yeah, I think what you've done for basketball has been pretty amazing worldwide. Your podcast is amazing. I mean, you've had people on that have been heroes of mine in coaching. Some guys that I view as mentors, the Jim Crutchfield, Dave Arsenal, Vance Wahlberg. You've had all those guys on, and those are guys I've consulted with. And then the NBA guys you've had on. And you had on Will Voigt the other day talking about critical thinking and decision making and just defensive concepts. And you had Chris Holtman, who I used to compete against back at Gardner-Webb when they were in the Big South as VMI was. Now he's the head coach at Ohio State. I mean, what you've done for basketball is just incredible, I think. getting it out to high school coaches, women's coaches, men's coaches. Like I said earlier, I think FIBA basketball is ahead of its time. I think Dave Smart, who you're close friends with, I think some of his concepts are amazing. We're actually going to employ some of those this year that I was able to get through Basketball Immersion, get insight into, his thinking and what he does. But just the product that you have out there, I'd encourage anybody getting into coaching. And more importantly, you had Eric Musselman on one time talking about lifelong learning. And I tell my coaches all the time, if you're not learning something every day, you're getting behind, whether it's basketball, whether it's how to deal with kids, whatever it is. But I think you provide unbelievable resources for all coaches in that area. So that's my 2 cents worth on basketball immersions.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you spending time and contributing to all of our learning as well. Because, Coach, you're going to have a lot more fans and you're going to get a lot more people reaching out and following Citadel basketball, which is awesome. And you deserve some attention on what you're doing and how you're doing it. And tremendous. So thanks for taking the time.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. And good luck to you. And I really appreciate the opportunity.
To find out more about Coach and all we spoke about today, please take a look at the show notes for today's episode. I love to share the game and have basketball coaching conversations, so connect with me on social media. You can find all my social media information and all your membership, clinic, and consulting needs at basketballimmersion.com. That concludes today's episode. I know there are so many podcasts out there. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Basketball Podcast with me, your host, Chris Oliver. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues so that we can keep bringing you the best of what's out there and share the game.